They call me a conqueror, an emperor, a tyrant. They say I changed Europe forever, and in that, they are not wrong. My name is Napoleon Bonaparte, and for a brief, glorious period, the world bent to my will. But my story is not a simple tale of power and conquest. It is the story of how ambition, genius, and destiny combined to forge a man who dared to challenge the old order and, in the process, redefine the future. I was born on an island of rugged mountains, far from the gilded salons of Versailles, and from there, I rose to sit on the grandest throne in Europe. I am the architect of a new code of law that still shapes nations today. A general who, with my army, swept across battlefields from Italy to Egypt, redrawing maps with the stroke of a pen and the thrust of a bayonet. Was I a man of my time, or a man outside of it? An enigma that history has yet to fully resolve. Some say I was a man of destiny, a force of nature that could not be stopped. Others view me as a cruel dictator, blinded by his own glory. They tell tales of my height, claiming I was a dwarf, a curious fabrication for a man of average stature. They speak of my ambition, but they often forget the circumstances that forged it. The poverty of my childhood, the feeling of being an outsider, the insatiable hunger for knowledge and recognition. They remember the empire, but they sometimes forget the boy who dreamed of a different life. 6 years after my death, a French writer wondered if my story was that of a man or that of a myth. The answer is that I am both, the man who became an emperor and the myth who succeeded me. My legacy is a mix of contradictions, liberty and tyranny, order and war, progress and empire. I was a revolutionary who became a monarch, a general who ruled as a statesman. The greatness I achieved was a mirror of the ambitions of a nation that dared to dream of a new world. My story is not just one of battles and crowns. It is a story of a young man from a remote corner of France who dared to challenge the old world and build a new one in its place. But to understand the man who stood at the summit of power, we must first go back to the beginning, to the small island where it all began, to the childhood of a boy who, like me, was shaped by the tension between his home and the empire that ruled it. Who was that boy? And how did the struggle of an island for its freedom plant the seed that would one day blossom into the ambition of an emperor? I was not born in Paris, a city of light and revolution. I was born in Ajaccio, Corsica, an island of rugged mountains and fierce independence. It was August 15th, 1769, a year after France had bought the island from Genoa. My name, then, was Napoleon di Buonaparte. My family, though part of the local nobility, was not rich. We had 8 children, and my mother, Letizia, was a woman of iron will. She was my first great influence, a strict disciplinarian who taught me the value of honor and resilience. She was the one who told me that a man must always stand firm, no matter the storm. Corsica was a land of constant struggle. The French had arrived, but the spirit of resistance, led by Pasquale Paoli, was still alive in the hearts of my countrymen. My own father, Carlo, had been a supporter of Paoli. This duality, being born into French rule, yet feeling a deep Corsican identity, created a tension within me that would define my entire life. I saw myself as a foreigner, an outsider, and that feeling followed me when I left for France. I felt caught between two worlds, and that sensation, far from weakening me, gave me a unique perspective. At the age of 9, my father sent me to military school in France, a world away from my home. I was a small boy, with a thick Corsican accent, and a name that sounded strange to French ears. They mocked me, calling me the Corsican. I was a loner, spending my time in the library, devouring books on history, philosophy, and mathematics. The great generals of antiquity, Alexander, Caesar, Hannibal, they became my companions. I studied their campaigns, their strategies, their triumphs, and their mistakes. It was in those quiet moments, alone with a book, that I began to see a path for myself. My love for mathematics, my precision, my ability to analyze and strategize, These were the first tools in my arsenal. My education at the military school in Brienne and later at the École Militaire in Paris was not just a training in military tactics. It was an immersion into the very heart of French society and its institutions. I was a brilliant student, excelling in artillery and engineering, but my character was forged in the isolation I felt. While my peers socialized, I read. While they boasted of their noble lineage, I was planning my own future. I was the silent observer, the student who took notes on the flaws of the system that surrounded him. I saw the decadence of the French monarchy and the injustices of the old order. I saw a society ripe for change, a system so fragile that a strong wind could topple it. As a young officer, I was not yet the man who would command an empire. I was a hungry, ambitious young man, a radical who believed in the principles of the French Revolution. I saw myself as a true republican, a man who would fight against tyranny and for the rights of the common man. I was a witness to the dawn of a new age, an age that demanded a new kind of leader. I was not a Frenchman by birth, but I was being shaped by their world, preparing for a future that no one, not even I, could yet imagine. The boy who was once mocked for his name and his island would soon get his chance to show them what a Corsican could do. But how did the fire of revolution finally ignite? And what role did I play in its first great blaze? The revolution arrived, a storm that swept away the old world. I saw it not as chaos, but as an opportunity. As a young officer, I proved my worth at the siege of Toulon, driving out the British and earning my first taste of glory. The chaos of the Directory that followed was a vacuum, and history abhors a vacuum. France needed a strong hand, a new direction, and I was there to provide it. My first military campaigns in Italy were not just a series of victories, they were a masterclass in swift, decisive action. I turned a tattered, demoralized force into a conquering machine, sweeping aside the Austrian Empire's best. In Egypt, I sought to strike at Britain's lifeline to India, and while the campaign had its challenges, it was a profound learning experience. I didn't just fight battles, I created new states and reformed old ones. I brought scholars and scientists with me to Egypt, not just soldiers. I understood that power was not just about military might, but about knowledge, culture, and progress. I returned to a France that was still in turmoil. The time was right. Through the coup of 18 Brumaire, I became first consul, and soon, emperor. My coronation was not a gift from God, but a ceremony of my own making. I took the crown and placed it on my head myself, a symbol that my power came not from divine right, but from my own will and the will of the French people. This was my greatest work, the consolidation of France. I instituted the Napoleonic Code, a legal framework that brought order and equality before the law, a system so enduring it still influences legal codes around the world today. I founded the Bank of France, stabilized the economy, and created the lycée system to educate the nation's future leaders. I wasn't just a general, I was a nation builder. I believed in meritocracy, that a man's position should be earned, not inherited. My own marshals came from humble beginnings. They were sons of coopers, innkeepers, and farmers. But to build this new world, I had to contend with the old one. The monarchs of Europe saw me as a threat, a usurper who had to be destroyed. So began the great wars of my reign. Austerlitz, Jena, Friedland, these were not just battles. They were masterpieces of military strategy, where I faced down entire coalitions and shattered their armies. The Grand Army, the most formidable force Europe had ever seen, marched from Lisbon to Moscow, carrying the ideals of the revolution with it. I was the master of Europe. Kings and emperors sought my favor. My family sat on thrones from Naples to Holland. But power is a heavy crown, and every triumph plants the seed of a future struggle. The British, with their powerful navy, were a constant thorn in my side, and my quest to break them led me to a disastrous policy, the continental system. This economic warfare, designed to cripple their trade, ended up hurting my own allies and fueling resentment against my rule. And then, there was the fatal error, the decision that would unravel it all. The march into the vast, frozen heart of Russia in 1812. The snows of Moscow proved to be a far more formidable enemy than any army I had ever faced. The long march, the bitter cold, the guerrilla tactics of the Russians, it was a battle against nature itself, and nature proved to be the ultimate victor. My world was beginning to crumble. The great empire I had built with blood and genius was beginning to crack. The end of my reign was not just a military defeat. It was a testament to the fact that even the greatest ambitions can be undone by overreach and a single, devastating mistake. But how did the man who once controlled a continent find himself a prisoner on a desolate island? And what were my final thoughts as I reflected on a life that had soared so high, only to fall so far? The retreat from Russia was a catastrophe. My grand army was shattered, and my enemies, sensing weakness, pounced. The coalitions rose again, stronger than ever. The tide had turned. I fought on, with brilliance and defiance, but I was no longer invincible. After the disastrous Battle of Leipzig, Paris was threatened, and in 1814, with the end in sight, I made a choice. I abdicated. The throne I had forged with my own hands was gone, and I was sent into exile on the small island of Elba, a king of a tiny rock. But a spirit like mine cannot be contained. The French people were not happy with the Bourbons who had returned, and I knew it. A year later, I escaped, landing on the shores of France with a small contingent of loyal men. The soldiers sent to stop me, one by one, joined my cause. My march to Paris was a bloodless triumph. This was my greatest victory, to reclaim my throne without firing a single shot. This brief period became known as the 100 Days. The world would not stand for it. The final act was set. At Waterloo, I faced the Duke of Wellington and the Prussian army. It was a close battle, a near victory that slipped through my grasp. A single mistake, a late arrival, a change in command. The reasons for that defeat have been debated for centuries. All I know is that on that day, the fate of an empire and of Europe was sealed. This time, there would be no more chances. They sent me to Saint Helena, a volcanic rock in the middle of the South Atlantic, a prison from which there was no escape. Here, for 6 years, I lived out my final days, plagued by illness and the petty cruelties of my British captors. I had all the time in the world to reflect. I dictated my memoirs. I recounted my campaigns. I relived my life. I saw the legacy I had built. I was no longer an emperor, a conqueror, or a general. I was a man, stripped of everything but my memory and my will. I thought of my family, of my soldiers, and of the grand vision I had for France and for Europe. They called me a tyrant, but I believed I was the instrument of a new age, a bringer of order and progress. My ambition was not for myself alone. It was to create a modern world, to sweep away the old feudal system and replace it with a society based on law, merit, and reason. I saw the seeds of my ideas spreading across Europe, even as my empire crumbled. My influence was felt in the unification of Germany and Italy, and in the rise of national identities across the continent. My very downfall, in a way, helped to create the world that would succeed me. I died on May 5th, 1821, far from the land I had ruled and the battles I had won. My final words, they say, were France, Armée, Tête d'Armée, Joséphine. My nation, my army, the head of my army, and the first love of my life. My story is a testament to what a single man can achieve, but also a cautionary tale of the limits of ambition. I may have lost my empire, but my name and my legacy endure, forever etched into the very fabric of history. If you enjoyed hearing my story, this journey through my life, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for listening to the words of an emperor.